What's going on, guys? Nathan Lombardi here with Lambeau Media.
I'm Christian Bergman, former pitcher for the Seattle Mariners and Colorado Rockies.
And welcome to the first ever episode of the Walk It Off podcast. And in these podcasts, we will have baseball updates, special guests, and talk lifestyle on each podcast episode. And the Monday before each podcast, we will announce that week's guest.
So this week we're going to be talking to my good friend and former teammate Chad Bettis, who recently announced his retirement after a 10-plus year career.
Most definitely. But before we get into that special guest appearance, let's talk about the recent news in the MLB. The recent news was the new 60-game MLB format that MLB just came out with. Just to give you guys a quick overview for those of you who don't know, it's a 60-game regular season beginning July 23rd and July 24th. Training beginning today, Wednesday, July 1st. Players and coaches will be tested every other day during training, regular season, and postseason. So the MLB definitely is taking safety precautions to have a continuous season and keep everyone safe and healthy. The 60 regular season games include 10 games against each of its 4 divisional opponents and 20 games against the opposite league's geographical division. For example, NL East will play the AL East and so on. And another big thing that's in the talks is not only will the AL have a DH this season, but also the NL will also have a DH. So, Christian, first of all, what are your thoughts on this new 2020 MLB season 60-game format?
Well, I mean, look, everybody was kind of dealing with this whole pandemic issue, and it's a tough situation. So honestly, I think, this is pretty good considering, all the difficulties with everything, scheduling and stuff like that. I think, this is about as good as you can. And, I know there were talks earlier about extending the season further into, October and November. And I think there were even talks about December. Do you remember hearing something like that?
Yeah, there's something about that since the season's starting later, and the postseason will be possibly pushed back a little bit because the season's starting later.
Yeah, I remember reading something about a World Series around Christmas or something like that. And
Yeah.
Obviously, you want to get as many games as possible in, but
Right.
when you start going into even November, and especially December, it starts having an impact on, the next season, so 2021. I think this is the best way to do it. Try and keep it as much on the regular schedule as it would have been.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that came up a lot was there was this back and forth between the players and MLB, and it didn't really look great PR wise. It looked like the players, wanted more money, or the owners, depending on which side you were on.
Right.
Basically, they were just arguing over money, and most people just want to see some baseball.
Exactly.
I think the thing that gets kind of swept under the rug is, they came to an agreement in March. There was some disagreement after that about whether that applied if there were fans in the stands or not. So we can, you and I will never know what the actual, understanding was, and we can go back and forth on that. But the key there was if the players accepted a proposal by Major League Baseball, they would forfeit to grievance, and they may or may not have been able to actually win that case. But the whole time it was on the table that the commissioner could implement this 60-game season, and that's eventually what ended up happening anyway. Now everything's done, it's over with. So I think something that kind of gets swept under the rug is that if the players had accepted a proposal prior to this deadline, they would have forfeited their right to a grievance. And, I think there was kind of a soft date where it was like, you know, we need to make a decision by this point. And, you know, the players may or may not have actually won a grievance, and it would have taken years to solve that. But in the end, the commissioner always had the right to implement this in the current format that we ended up getting. So, although it didn't look good, in my opinion, I don't think it's unfair for the players to want to get their prorated salary. And honestly, like, as business owners, the owners, they have a right to try and run their business in a certain way. So, I don't really fault anyone. We're going to see baseball, and that's ultimately what everybody wanted. And the players get what they wanted, and so I think, given all the difficulties with it, this is a pretty good place to start. And I think everybody's happy to just get going.
Right. And another thing is, like I mentioned a bit earlier, the NL will be having the capability of using DHs this season. With that being the case, and this possibly even being the case in the near future, even after this season, some of these NL positional players will be able to add a few years to their career, with possibly having the capability to just hit in their later years in their career when they start getting a little older, and they start getting in less of MLB shape and less of positional players shape, and they'll start transforming into having the capability of just hitting and boosting up their statistics because they're just focusing on the hitting side of things.
Yeah, and you see that a lot when, look, being a position player is not easy. I was a pitcher, and even as a reliever, I think the most, I don't remember the most games I threw in one year, but like, even as a reliever, I think usually the reliever that appears in the most games is right around half, and that's somewhat rare. So position players going out there every single day, you get beat up, and it's little things here and there. You just get banged up, and after 10 years of doing that, yeah, it gets harder and harder to actually go out there and play a position at a high level.
Right.
So, the history behind the DH is kind of interesting. The fact that there's only a DH in the American League is odd.
Yeah.
I consider myself kind of a baseball. You really look at it, it's like, well, I can't really think of a good reason why it's only in the AL. So, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And, I have a feeling it'll be permanent after this season. So, but we'll see.
I hope so. I just think that everything that happens in the AL should be just the same on the NL side of things, and the same thing as the opposite way. Like, if something goes on in the NL, same thing should happen in the AL, just like this DH case.
Yeah, I think it was back in the 70s or early 80s, the American League, or they actually tried it out in like the AAA.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's very interesting. Let's transition into the Chad Bettis appearance.
Chad Bettis gets ready to come all the way back. And again, I cannot imagine what's going through his mind right now.
What's up, everybody? Today we're joined by Chad Bettis. He's a recently retired right-handed pitcher, formerly of the Colorado Rockies and briefly the New York Yankees. After being drafted in the second round by the Rockies in 2010 out of Texas Tech University, he quickly dominated the Northwest League and California League, being named an All-Star in both and Pitcher of the Year in Modesto. After having surgery, no, it wasn't surgery, was it?
No surgery.
Just like wait and see. In 2012, it was a cranky lat, I guess you could say. So he took the year off in 2012, picked up right where he left off, though, in 2013. made his major league debut on August 1st. Called up from Double-A Tulsa, where we were actually roommates. One of the best houses
That
I've
was
ever
sick.
lived in. Then after experimenting as a reliever in 2014, decided to come to camp in 2015 as a starter. After dealing with some shoulder issues early on, put together a solid season with the Rockies, and from then on through 2016 was a rock in the rotation. Won 14 games, made all 32 starts. Then in offseason of 2016, fortunately, you're diagnosed with testicular cancer. Had surgery to remove it. However, in the months that followed, we're told that it had spread and required chemotherapy. But as we all knew you would, August 14th, made your triumphant return to the mound against the Braves in Denver. Pitched 7 scoreless innings, inspiration to countless millions, and because of that, winner of the Tony Conigliaro Award 2017, which is given annually to the major league player who best overcomes an obstacle and adversity through the attributes of spirit, determination, and courage. Husband, father, one of my best friends, best teammates I ever played with, Chad Bettis. Thanks for coming on with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This is a pleasure, man. This is a lot of fun. It's
Yeah,
nice.
So recently, what was it? Been a week?
Not even.
Not even?
I feel like it's been like days here. I don't know, maybe a week. I don't
Yeah.
really know. I'm not counting anymore. Right?
I know.
Like I know
Yeah,
today is Monday now. It's not like day 3 of the season or something, right?
It's not bullpen day or anything.
Right, exactly. You're not going off of starts and bullpens and whether you're up or down.
Yeah. So how does it feel so far?
It feels good. You know, I just feel like it's honestly, it's like it's so fresh and so new that you know, I don't know if it's really set in yet. You know, the onslaught it hasn't set on yet, and you know, it's just like we're clicking along here. We're getting ready for the next adventure, the next phase of life, and so you know, I really haven't had too much time to like decompress from everything. You know, it's just been like kind of, you know, it honestly it feels just kind of like we announced it, we knew it was going to happen, and now it's just like, you know, you shift gears so fast that it hasn't really even begun to like digest, you know, what it's meant, what everything has kind of gone through and stuff like that. So it's really new.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit about this before. You know, what was it that, you know, made you finally make like the decision? Okay, you know, that's it.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, honestly, it was, you know, it was just basically my body. You know, my body's not cooperating the way it needs to, in more ways than one. And you know, it unfortunately, you know, the surgery didn't completely do its job, and therefore,
that was the hip surgery, right?
Yeah, the bilateral hip surgery, and so, you know, it's like, you know, it's unfortunate, but at the same time, you know, from knowing that kind of information, it made my decision pretty easy, right? Because it was like, now you shift gears into figuring out what you want to do next, what needs to be done next, right? Because you know, there are some physical qualities that go into being a baseball player, to being a major league baseball player, and what those physical demands are. And for me, it was just, it's something that my body wasn't going to be able to do, you know, and it's unfortunate, but at the same time, you know, I envision being able to like do stuff with my family, do stuff with my daughter, hopefully have another kid someday, you know, and be able to like hang out and be a dad and still do stuff without completely like beating my body down into a spot where, you know, it's at such a detriment.
Yeah. And, you know, I can kind of attest to that as well, because, you know, we all grow up with, you know, our dream of being baseball players.
Right.
And then we get to do it. And, you know, we all envision ourselves playing until we're 42.
Right.
But when you look at it, it's like, that obviously doesn't happen very often.
No,
Uh,
no, 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 it does
and,
not.
so when you really think about it, like, you really figure out, it seems like what you're saying, that you realize what's really important, and, you accomplished some really awesome things in your career. Um, and, but there is life there for everybody. There's life
Right.
after
And I
baseball.
think I think that's what like a lot of people get a little too caught up in, right? It's like, I think, it's easy to get into, uh, that mode where you think baseball is everything, which is, it's not a bad thing to think that
Right.
way, but at the same time, I do think, at some point there becomes the maturity level of growing a little bit more and understanding that, baseball is as fun as it is, as much of a dream that it is for us that we accomplish something. It is still something that we do. It is not what
Right.
it's not who we are. It's what we do. And so I think, realizing that back in 2014, it was like that offseason, I got so far away from baseball that it was like such a nice, fresh start again in 2015 that it was like, it was a new excitement, and I think people sometimes get a little too caught up in thinking, just one way necessarily, not broadening their mind a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, you had a very solid career in Colorado. What would you say your most memorable moment in out of your career in Colorado was?
I don't know. I think there's quite a bit of memorable moments for me. I think the comeback game, my debut. I think the feeling and the bliss of the shutout I threw against the Giants, like not necessarily
I
that
remember
game, but
that.
just like that feeling, right? Of like being so into each pitch, so indulged in each moment that nothing else felt like it was impacting you. Like your thought process was so clear that it was like nothing could go wrong, right? And so it's that was something for me that I felt like I was always trying to fight and get back to, right? Of like how far can I be so in the moment that you're making these decisions and you're so you're so, I'm trying to think what the word would be,
Like wrapped up in the moment.
yeah, it's like your intent with each pitch is it has a moment of where you're actually impacting what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that's what I was always fighting to get back to. But I think honestly, those moments for me are really great. What I think I remember more though is like uh, you know, scheming up game plans about how you're going to get a guy out, or how you should sequence this batter, or chess games, or like just talking about baseball in general in the dugout while you're trying to figure out what might and anticipate what might happen, what should be done, and just growing off of that. Because I think it's so easy to just kind of like flick seeds or eat seeds in the the dugout and oh no, I lost 3 innings, right? Whereas like if you like actually sit down and I learned a lot more from talking about baseball and asking sometimes really stupid questions
Right.
than thinking like, oh, it's like, well, what would you do in this moment? Well, what would your pitch be? And so it's like you always kind of kick back that stuff. And for me, I think because I felt like I wanted to be so process oriented that's what I'm gonna miss. That's what like sticks with me now. Like the games, the process, or like excuse me, the moments, the memories. Those are all great, but the process for me was what it should be about.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to touch on something you brought up about that shutout you threw against San Francisco. I remember that because I was sitting in the bullpen.
Yeah.
And I think to end the game, you struck out Hunter Pence on like a 65-mile-an-hour curveball.
Yeah.
And I remember asking you after, I was like, where did that come from? Where did a 65-mile-an-hour curveball come from? Like you threw like a slower one, but
Right.
all of a sudden, like you could see it from the bullpen. Like this thing goes, pew! And obviously he was nowhere near it. And you said something like, honestly, I don't know. I was just like in the moment, and that's what I threw, and that's how it came out.
Yeah.
I think that's like it really is important because it doesn't necessarily like make sense. You weren't locked into those are my pitches. That's what you felt in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you're talking about is being so wrapped up that you're being completely present. That happens both in the game and outside the game.
Right. Yeah. Which is cool.
Yeah.
Right. You also mentioned the comeback game, August 14th, 2017. That was your first game back since being diagnosed with testicular cancer. How emotional and special was that night for you?
Oh, man. I mean, it's hard to put into words, because it was like going through that whole process of the cancer, thinking it's gone, knowing it's coming back, having to go through chemo, and then finally like knowing that I get to start basically rebuilding my body to be a player again. It was never that it was never in question for me that like that I would be a baseball player again. It was when kind of thing. But at the same time, it was, you know, it wasn't like there wasn't a hard date, right? It was like whenever everything feels right, that's when it'll be good to go again. But I think that because I was never really thinking about that moment, that's why it was so impactful, because it was so far in the back of my head. It wasn't like, oh, okay, I'm going to make this cool comeback and this and this and that or whatever. It was like, okay, stay focused on the task at hand. What do I need to do today? Because I have to prepare my body, right? And it's completely different. I feel like your perspective doesn't necessarily go from like, I need to get my arm feeling right or I need to get velo up. It's like, how do I get my body back in shape? How do I get my lungs, where I can breathe again kind of thing, and slow the game down with breathing and stuff like that. And so that game, I remember leading up to that day, it was like, oh yeah, like it's, just kind of another game. It's just another game. It's just another game. And that's what I kept telling myself. And I felt like when I woke up that morning, I was like, no, screw that.
Yeah.
It's like, this isn't another game. This is a big moment for me. And then I think that's when it kind of all hit, right? It's like when I woke up, it was like, oh my gosh, all this work I just put in, and like all the emotions of like, today's the day that this is happening, and, I think back to like all my friends, Fergie reaching out to me, my family being there with me through everything, and like, just, man, it's like, it still gives me like goosebumps a little bit thinking about it because it was so incredible. It's too hard to put into words. Honestly, it's impossible.
Were you nervous?
I was so nervous that I almost threw up.
Were you more nervous your debut or that day?
That day, which was weird because my debut, and that's what that's what I keep telling to everybody, like all the young guys that came up with the Rockies before they made their debut or whatever. It was like, yo, live it, because you only get one. And I felt like in my debut, I kind of came in at a rough point in time during that road trip. People were on like a little lull. It was kind of a weird like feeling, right? And it was just like, okay, I need to go out there and go do what I can do. It wasn't like, oh, this is the big deal. You're making your debut. I knew it was a big deal, but at the same time, it was like, I gotta get the team out of the rut, right? And like, you don't get to think about oh, I get to enjoy this moment. It's like, how do it was almost like I felt like I not forced into a situation, but where it was like I didn't get to enjoy it, but kind of, right? It was like, um, hey, kid, go do your job. We need to get a win, right? And it's like, oh, yes, sir, I got you. It was like, not like, hey, I don't care what happens. I don't care if you give up 20. Go have fun. Like this is a little kid's dream,
Right.
Like you worked all your life for this. And so for me, the comeback game was meant more than I would rank it higher than my debut, just from emotions, from nerves, from anxiety, from like rolling out in the weight room, trying to keep it together before the game, before I walk out to the bullpen. Like, I was a mess, like holding back tears. It was crazy. It was unbelievable. Like, never did I think that I would get to that point of emotion in the game. And then after that happened, it was like, you can use emotion, like I think there's some emotion that can be suppressed in baseball, and I get that, but for the most part, there towards the latter part of the end of my career, it was like, hey, I was trying to get guys to understand, like, use your emotion, use your, like, you have adrenaline, you have your butterflies, but like, how can you amplify that emotion to make it useful to you? And it was something that I'm still trying to grasp a little bit on, and just like talking with other guys around the league. But it was like, it seems like it's something that would be very powerful. I think there's some guys that do it really well, but I just think it's a wormhole, right? You just like start talking about it. You can go on for an hour and a half about how it could or couldn't, or how it could make you better, how it could really screw you up,
Right.
Take you out of the moment, put you in the past, put you in the future. It's like slippery slope.
Right.
How long did it take you to settle in that first game back from being diagnosed and like, let's get to work? Or were you like that from the start, from the first bit?
No, I think so. I think after the first play of the game, I was like, oh, okay, like these guys aren't here to like, the Braves aren't here to like let me kind of cruise by and enjoy
I remember
this
that.
day.
It was almost an inside the park home run.
Oh
right?
my God! Edgar Inciarte hits a pitch. Geraldo Parra dives for it, which I absolutely respect. Like, guys trying to like play his heart out. That's who he is. I love it. I love when guys bust their butt right behind me. Like, I'm never gonna.
It was kind of an in-between one where it was like, you just got to decide.
So he dove for it, right? Ball slides all the way to the wall. Inciarte is fast. I remember he gets past third, and I'm like, oh no, like this is how the game's gonna start off. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And then Parra throws a BB to Nolan. Nolan throws it home, and he's out by like a foot and a half, a step and a half. And it's like, okay, these guys are here to step on my throat. It's all like, let's go.
Yeah.
So after that, it was like, all right, I better lock this in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it took me a little bit, because it was like, like, oh, this is nice. This is a lot of motion. He took the first pitch, and I was like, oh, this is like, I hate when guys like don't give me a read in the box. And so it was like, what is that? What is he expecting? Like, I don't get to gauge off of what I wanted to do next. And so, yeah, but after that first play, I was like, oh man, let's go.
I gotta lock it in now.
Yeah, right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's next for you?
So we're actually we're in the process of packing up, and we're gonna be moving back to Texas, in Frisco, and helping run the family business and help it grow and go from there.
Awesome, man.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on as our first ever guest of the Walk It Off podcast episode. Christian, that's all I have. Do you have anything else to add?
Oh man, thanks for coming on. Really enjoyed talking to you,
Yeah, of
and
course, of course.
best
Yeah,
of
for
luck
sure.
in your next endeavor.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Chad.
Yeah.
And now let's transition into the fan question from Jeff in California. There's obviously a new extra innings rule with runners on second base right out of the gate. With the new extra innings rule, how often does the runner end up scoring, and does it really speed up the game? Christian, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've seen this in practice in like the minor leagues and AAA, and especially with this season, considering the rosters are a little more constrained. From what I saw, it did usually by like the 11th or 12th.
Right.
There was a resolution of the game. If I had to guess, I'd say, because you're starting with a runner at second with nobody out. Um, I'd say, more than half the time
Yeah.
uh, he's scoring, and then it's really up to the home team, obviously the home team, to respond. And if they don't, then that's it. So I mean, that's what I've seen. Hopefully, this doesn't, continue as like a rule in the future,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I think it's a little artificial in my opinion. But
Yeah.
for now, I don't think it's such a bad thing.
Yeah, you even see it like in the little leagues to speed up the game process and keep the fans entertained. That's what they're going to try to do even in the MLB in the future. So I think it'll definitely speed it up, and even at the lower levels, you've seen people score a lot quicker rather than when they're starting with no one on base, and they just need the hitters to produce and score that runner in scoring position.
Yeah. So I think it'll do for now, and but there is something to be said for, like, a game that does go on,
Right,
to the 15th, 16th inning. You
right.
know, no, nobody really necessarily likes it at the time, but
Uh-huh.
people always remember it.
Yeah,
I remember
right.
games where we went to the 17th inning. It just felt like it was never going to end.
Yeah,
So that's why I hope it doesn't really continue
yeah.
past this season. But I guess I see the point for now.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, I like it. I like it for now. I can see why they're doing it this season, and hopefully it doesn't go too it doesn't continue beyond this season alone. I think they need to keep the game as similar as possible to when they started. It's America's game. People obviously liked it for a reason. They shouldn't change it up too much. So that's just my opinion and my take on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Walk It Off podcast. Christian, I really enjoyed this time. We obviously had a good conversation with Chad Bettis. We talked about the new 60 game format at the beginning of the video. If you guys missed that, go make sure to check that out at the beginning of the video. And I look forward to next week's episode as well.
Yeah, looking forward to it. If you guys have any questions, make sure to comment below. Let
Yep.
us know, and we'll answer those on our next episode.
Sweet. Stay tuned for next week's episode with another special guest. Thanks, you guys.
See you guys.